everyone. I'm Brent Cassity. I'm the host of the Nightmare Success podcast that explores what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? These are all comeback stories of people that have been directly affected by the criminal justice system. We're just finishing our fourth season with over 200 interviews, and I am a justice impacted person receiving a 5-year sentence at Leavenworth. And I'm a proud member of the White Collar Support Group. And I want to say, we always say here that when someone goes to prison, a whole family goes to prison. And we're so honored here today to have Joe Bankman. And for a lot of people, they've followed this story of Sam Bankman-Fried. And Joe Bankman is Sam Bankman-Fried's dad. And Sam, if you don't know, and I don't know how you couldn't know, but just to tell you a little bit, Sam was the founder of FTX. And at one point, Sam was the 41 richest person on the Forbes billionaire list. Things came crashing down on November of 2022. The company was forced into bankruptcy that led to a criminal federal indictment that followed Sam going to a jury trial and being convicted to 25 years in federal prison at the age of 33. In order to forfeit over $11 billion. This was a national story that everyone was following, but there was a family living through this. The Bankman-Fried family was surviving a nightmare together. Joe is here today to talk to us about what it was like living through this nightmare as a family. But before we do that, I want to tell you just a little bit about Joe Bankman. Joe, of course, is Sam's dad, but Joe is a very accomplished man. He's a leading scholar on tax law. He's been involved in a lot of legislation trying to simplify the tax code. He's a clinical psychologist as well as a lawyer and a law professor of Stanford Law School for 37 years. Joe has also hosted a couple of podcasts, the Wellness Cast discussing wellness and the health and the legal profession, and the Stanford Legal Podcast. We're honored to have Joe Bankman here today to discuss how his family dealt with a tidal wave that changed their lives forever. And I want to tell everybody, just to invite you, if we have extra time, put questions in the chat, and hopefully we can get to those. Joe Bankman, thank you for being here today. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Brent. I'm good, and thank you all for attending, and I hope you do have questions. It's always more fun to have dialogue than listen to a speech.
I agree with that. Joe, you and Barbara, this was a household. This was a smart household. The DNA in this household, there's some good stuff going around as professors and kids growing up in that world. We don't know a lot about Sam, before all this. And as the dad, did you see Sam as this extraordinary kid that was going to build this empire and become this entrepreneur at an early age?
No, we were as surprised as anyone, and we knew nothing about the field he entered, cryptocurrency. When I first heard the word crypto, I thought of a cryptogram.
Right.
I thought it was something about puzzles.
Yeah, exactly. And so this thing starts growing. It gets big. I mean, it gets real big. The size where it gets national recognition. What are mom and dad thinking?
Well, we're cheering Sam on. Sam lived to give money away, and that, if you read Michael Lewis's book or if you follow this, he never spent any money on himself, and his goals were to improve welfare, and slept on a beanbag chair, doesn't do small talk. He's come out as Aspie, in his own words, has Asperger's. So we thought, well, this is great. You're going to do so much good. And we got involved in some of those wonderful projects he had.
Yeah, he was very well known for the philanthropy and getting into things and trying to find solutions. So, you and I talked, we did a podcast together that we're going to release next week. And one of the things that we talked about, Joe, was that there really weren't any black storm clouds over the horizon. You had gotten involved a little bit with the philanthropy stuff. The company was a known company, but then, the thunder hit as you described it, like a tidal wave hit the family on November 2022. Can you take us back to your emotions at that time?
Sure. I was absolutely shocked. And I know that some of you, most of you, have been involved in justice for yourself and not family members. So you had this evil, horrible sense of foreboding, I think, in general. But November 5th and 6th, one of the best days of my life. To start off, I was doing these wonderful charities for Sam. It was so exciting for me. And I had absolutely no idea that anything was amiss. And I used the tidal wave metaphor that all of a sudden you're swimming for your life and you see your son swept out to sea and your house is in ruins because no matter what you start with, we know the criminal justice system will take everything from you and everything from your family to support you. And I'm yelling for help. And that was kind of the start of my new life. Just as some of you, we heard Craig say, this was the start of his new life.
Yeah, and it changes everything at that moment, because at that moment, that family is going to be experiencing something that is the unknown. And unfortunately, there's not a book for that. But, you know, you were in a kind of a strange place, Joe, because being an attorney, being a clinically trained psychologist, you're in this disaster zone with Sam as his dad, as an attorney, as a psychologist. Was that a help or a hindrance to give him advice and you to try to cope with getting through this?
As it happened, Brent, being an attorney was no help at all because
Okay.
I was sophisticated as can be about some parts of the law and just knew enough about criminal law, which actually I taught for a few years at Stanford, to be really ignorant of how it really works. So I made so many bad legal calls in the early days, I can't even tell you. I think being a psychologist did help me because I had a few more tools than most people had to stay as strong as I could. And my guess is in all of your stories, as I look out on all of you, there was something that enabled you to be here. And I might have had a little more access to some of that than some other people.
That's a good point, because we all reach these dark and some of us very rock bottom moments.
Yeah.
In those moments, what was your best way of coping?
Uh, well, I'll be honest. When it first happened, I thought, I've never thought about suicide, and I know I could never do it, but do I get to think about it now? And so I thought about it, and I thought that's not going to attract me. That I can't do it, and it's not even attractive for me. And so I decided that I've got to live the best life I can. That helped me because I faced the worst. I said, I might not be able to change anything. I still have to make meaning of my life. And for me, that was a very useful self-dialogue to put me on the right path.
I think that is so powerful, Joe, because there are so many of us that are on this today, seeing and talking, that have contemplated or tried suicide, which is a terrible thought. And it's one of those things that you can't believe you're ever there, because most of us are the glass half full people.
Yeah.
But one of the things I think that comes out of that, and I think that when you hit that moment and you decide that's not going to be the answer, you have switched gears and paths from being a victim in this situation to being a survivor. And somehow in your darkest moments, it feels better to say you're surviving this. You're doing things to step into whatever this is that scares the hell out of you, But saying you're a survivor than being a victim somehow gives you new strength. And I think that what you just said there, for a lot of us, that makes so much sense.
Well, thank you. Thank you. A friend of mine who's a terrific therapist said, Joe, you've got to develop a superpower. And I think he was thinking of the superpower as being a samurai warrior for my son. And I'd love to have that superpower,
Sure.
but I'm not a conflict guy. And so I decided my only superpower was to be resilient. That's the only thing I could do. And that worked for me. And I'm suspecting that it might have worked for some others, including you, Brent.
Well, it did. And I think, Joe, what you find is, and I know as families, they find this new recognition of what you can adapt to. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe we got through that. Looking back on that, I can't believe we got through that. And you can almost check it off as you go through. I can't believe as a family we got through that. Speaking of family, you guys, I had a national story that was horrible and hard to get through, but it was just, the size of a gnat compared to what you all went through as a family with the national media and the daily barrage and the people trying to get a hold of you. Did you develop a strategy of how you were going to handle that as a family?
Uh, I think we did. And I think the good news is all your fears about humiliation and about being in the public eye, uh, on the one hand, they come true. On the other hand, once they come true, you realize that's not the real problem. Our real problem wasn't the invasion of our privacy by the press or the fact that when we went to that courthouse every day, we barely could get in because of the press blocking our way. Our problem, frankly, was our son's life and what we thought of as an unjust prosecution and so on, and making sure that our son survived. And that made everything else a lesser problem.
Yeah, and one of the things that you talked about when we were doing the podcast was, and I thought it was smart advice, is you just shut everything down because you figured whatever's being said in these news stories, is it really that helpful? Can it really be any good for me to take all that in? Or do what you just said, Joe, just bond together as a family, be as strong as you can, and stay in this bubble of what you can control. Because one of the things that happens to families when they get into this situation is the feeling of being totally out of control, where a lot of us that get into these situations are used to being in complete control. So I think that is, and we talked about this in our other interview. Excellent advice, Joe, is to shut down that noise out there so that you can focus on what you just said is important.
Yeah, that's right. And for us, not reading journalism was important. And I might say that before that, we were junkies. Nobody read more than we did. We listened to everything. And in fact, in my own little field, I was a talking head. I knew these periodicals. I even knew some of the journalists a little bit. And let me say my opinion of institutions, including the Fourth Estate journalism, fell quite a bit, but I quickly realized that I had to dissociate from that because I couldn't be what other people were telling me I was, and I had to block that out.
Well, let's talk about, because families, you have the person who is, for me on my side, I was going through it, but my kids and my wife and everybody were going to school. They were going to their job. And for you, Joe, you were on that other side. Let's talk about that, because here you are as a professor, you have students, you have an institution. What was that like for you?
Well, the good news is people were great. And Brent, we talked about that in our other interview about people in your life and your daughter's life that stood up for you and appeared almost out of nowhere to give you those moments of grace and support. And my guess is a lot of you have had that too. And when I think of it, I try to focus on that. People like a guard in a prison that went way out of his way to be kind to us. And you so appreciate that. In my life, I wonderful colleagues. I live to teach. I've always been a teacher for over 40 years. Students have always been a huge source of support and meaning for me. The downside is institutions are tough. And my guess is you've all faced that. You face it in a high profile case, even if you're a parent. I wasn't allowed to teach for a while. And for me, and neither was Sam's mother. And for me, that was a real cost. And I think people were just scared at what would happen if this high profile guy associated with someone people think of as a high profile criminal is going to be in our halls teaching.
Yeah, and I think you hit on it. It scares them. It's
Yeah,
scary. It's the unknown for an institution. What will it mean for us? And in some cases, it can be real. They can get drawn in,
sure.
but you don't think of when you hear these stories of the mom, the dad, the wife, that they could actually lose jobs, that
Yeah,
they could be shunned from clubs or communities or baseball teams or all those different things. And those are things that really can happen that the family has to live through while this person over here is dealing with a federal investigation.
yeah. And it's, among other things, it's ruinously expensive, not just in terms of money, which it is, but in terms of your psyche. Because at the same time, you're trying to be there for your family member, and that's your number one obligation as a parent, I think. Uh, you're also trying to fight a kind of rear guard action to make sure that you can continue in your own life and your own career.
How did you handle that with Stanford when they said, we want you to pull back? We want you to stand aside. What was
Uh,
your,
I was just like a dog with a bone. I just kept saying it makes no sense. I got anybody I knew to fight for me. I had a sense I might win that because for one thing, I have tenure. But I kind of knew that if a student is taking my class, they're interested in learning something. They actually aren't focusing on my son. I teach a tricky subject. They want to know how to handle that subject. And same with my colleagues. So I kind of knew in my heart that it made no sense, that teaching is something I'm good at. Barbara and I have been lucky enough to win a number of teaching awards each. This was something you couldn't deny me, and that kind of put me forward. I might say Stanford continued to pay me, so that was the number one priority because believe me, we
yeah.
needed and need the money. But now I'm teaching full time.
Well, you said something, Joe, that I thought was important because people are paranoid when they walk into a room. They don't, when you're under siege and you just said to your students, hey, if you want to ask me about it, you don't want to ask me about it, I'm perfectly fine with both. And I think it kind of disarmed everybody to just be themselves. And I think that's really wise advice is that we're not afraid to talk about it. It's what people, it's like if you have an illness, how do you talk to somebody about that? And if we just are open with it, say, hey, you want to talk about it? Great. I don't mind talking about it. If you don't want to talk about it, great. And I think that's disarming for your students or your colleagues or anybody else that's around you.
I think that's right. And I want to acknowledge, I'm sure it's harder for the faces I'm looking at because it was you. It's easier, as hard as it is as a parent, when you love your children so much and have worked with them, it's harder if it's you. So, but that advice works. And I'm told that by many people that they're relieved to hear it, including friends who might want to ask me or might not want to ask me, and then they're going through a mind game themselves. Are they pushing too much? Are they too cowardless to bring it up? And I try to say right away, you can't screw up on this. You're
That's
my
right.
friend no matter what. My problem is not the awkwardness about talking about this. That's not going to be my problem in life right now.
So Sam did something, Joe, that a lot of people don't do, is they actually went to trial.
Yeah.
Um, what was that like trying to find the right trial attorney, to have the right vibe with the family, to feel like you were getting the right defense, representation? How did that feel as a dad?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you on that, but before, let me again acknowledge, of course, you didn't go to trial. For one thing, you might have been guilty. And even if you weren't guilty on all of those charges, the state is so awesome and people so rarely win trials that you might have just decided, I can't afford it.
Right.
And of course, we're maybe poster children for people who tried to afford it and tried to win the trial and didn't. Uh, it was all a nightmare. We were completely unprepared to find the right attorney. I might say that by now, I know some right attorneys, including, I don't want to, I don't know if I can plug, but Elizabeth Kelly is here, who has helped us. And there are terrific attorneys out there, but you could be a Stanford law professor and not have a clue as to how to find them.
So true. And how you find things out as you go. So just like the movies, this family walks into a courtroom, and you know, when you're doing that, Joe, you have, when you walk into that courtroom, you've had a mountain of media. You've had this talking indictment that the U.S. attorneys are so good about creating their narrative, this monster narrative, and just pounding it home through the networks that they have. And then you walk in as the dad and mom and your son as innocent until proven guilty. Did you feel like when you walked into that courtroom that there was a semblance of a chance with all that other stuff around?
Uh, I knew the odds were way against us because, even before the trial started, there are roughly 1 million pretrial motions. And the judge we drew, and you draw a judge by lot. The judge we knew had denied every one of them and had jailed Sam ahead of time on the thought that his offering to help was an attempt to intimidate a witness. So, as if he were a mafioso, fearsome character who said, just wanted to know you to know that I can do some help and you're going to think he's going to kill me. Uh, so I knew that we were in trouble, and listening experientially to a government that you always loved say the world's worst things about your son, particularly when you believe, and I think accurately, that many, if all of them are untrue, has to be one of the world's worst experiences.
And I
And
know
this goes on for weeks.
well, that's what I was going to say. The trial, how long did the trial last?
Trial lasted, I have a little PTSD. I can't even tell you, it lasted over 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of days which were solely devoted to the excoriation of the person you love most in the world.
I just can't imagine, Joe, in that situation, day in, day out. You're sitting there. You're not, because, Sam is imprisoned. So you're just seeing him walk in. Like you had mentioned, maybe the marshal allows you to say, I love you. And, I, support whatever those words of encouragement are, but you might not even get that day. And then you're, basically attacked when you leave the courtroom, having to wade yourself through uh, all the media that wants a picture or a comment. Or how did you do that? How did you cope with those weeks?
Well, I think we all have inner resources, and I'm guessing everyone I'm looking at went through something like that in a different way, your first day of prison, for example. But uh, you're right, Brent, just to bring people there. Sam is woken up at 3 a.m. In his prison. He's taken to a holding cell in the courthouse, and he's released maybe a half an hour before trial. At this stage, excuse me, was also not given his meds, despite our pleas for that. And he's brought in, and you're not allowed as a parent to say anything to him. So he's in front of you, but you're not going to be able to speak to him at best after the trial is over for the day and before he's taken back to the cell to start that process, not getting back, by the way, till 10 at night. At best, a kindly marshal will allow you to go up to your son, not touch him, but to say, I love you. And that's your only contact. Uh,
Mm.
it was very hard. Now, the reporters, though, again, I want to make a distinction. What we did after a while is I said, look, I know you are going to want to take our picture. There's nothing we can do to stop that. How about we stop here? You take the picture of the parents, and then you let us walk to the subway alone. And the reporters honored that. So we posed, and it's the most awful thing in the world to pose for a picture under these circumstances. But the quid pro quo is once you go through those subway turnstiles, you've now returned to a different life, at least in the sense of nobody is staring at you.
It's such a moment in time. You bring me back to talking about PTSD and trying to block those things out. You and I talked about when I had 6 defendants in my case, but we were that family that walked out together, and that ended up being the picture that was everywhere, the front page of everything. And the, for me as a dad, that's my wife. Those are my kids. And those people aren't in this as an indicted, now convicted person, but they're going to be living in this picture because everybody's going to see it. And as we have said at the very beginning of this, that is why we say when someone goes to prison, the family goes to prison, because you have to experience it on the outside and figure out how to survive.
That's right.
So, the trial lasts, it's ugly. Um, as we all know, the judge has so much power in that courtroom, and you can kind of feel how it goes. When sentencing happens, we see it in the movies, but I can't imagine as a dad sitting there when it comes down to that they tell you and it's stated that your son is going to be in prison for 25 years. What went through your mind?
Well, we had a pretty good sense of where this judge was throughout. But again, to bring people there, uh, it's not just that they deliver a sentence. This judge read a 30-minute speech that he'd prepared, uh, accusing my son of things, including things he wasn't charged with, and offering his own opinions. So you're listening to this even before sentence is pronounced. It's a it's not like seeing your son, I guess, executed, but 25 years in prison, statistically, that's not really good for your health, and it's taking away much, much of your life. And so you're seeing your son's life kind of disappear before your eyes. Now, there's an appeal, and uh, we're optimistic that something will change, but we're also realistic. And so it's one of the worst days of your life. Second, maybe only to the day when the prosecution delivers their closing statements and uses your son's lack of eye contact, for example, as a symbol of guilt.
Mm. I, you just said something there about the appeals and that your life, this moment of living in this nightmare hasn't stopped. It just continues on as far as how you guys continue to exist fighting. Um, we talked about something that caught my attention, Joe, because I always think of it from the person, the ex-felon that gets out of prison, but I wasn't thinking about debanking as somebody that was a mom or a dad. Can you walk us through how that and what happened with you on that?
Sure, sure. This is a small thing, but something you experience. My guess is all of you experience this directly. All of a sudden, you lose your bank accounts. And I didn't know they could take away your bank account. I thought that's like going to CVS and being told we're not going to give drugs to you anymore. Your prescriptions can't be delivered. So you lose your bank accounts, and then what do you do? I mean, you need a bank. You have all these automatic deposits. You're worried about your electricity going off. And of course, you try to remember everything that's on an automatic deposit, but you're a little, to use a Yiddish word, vermished, right? You're really overloaded in general. I see Jeff laughing at that. You're a little overloaded in general. Say, oh my God, the electricity, the insurance, and then you go for another bank account, but by now you're a little paranoid, right? The first one canceled me. And so on our next bank account, Barbara and I didn't get a joint account because it's Bankman-Fried. We figured I'll get Bankman, she'll get Fried. Unfortunately, my second bank figured out that Bankman was part of Bankman-Fried, and they canceled me as well. So it's one of the things you go through, and it's small, but it takes up a lot of time because you're frantic
Stress.
anyway, and now you're worried about how can I cash my paycheck?
Were you able to finally find a bank?
Yeah, we were. And Brent, I hear that you actually know some banks that will bank you, and that's wonderful. So if you can plug them, I'd love to hear
Well,
that.
and Drew Chapin, who is a member of the White Collar Support Group, this is one of his passions is this debanking. And it's one of those undercurrent things that's not talked about a lot. In fact, I was sitting with someone the other day that's a huge person in the reentry community, um, and had been the head of probation for the Eastern District of Missouri. And he said, "Well, I didn't know anything about debanking. What's that about?" It's like it's such a big deal. He knows nothing about it, but it's a punishment. It's a punishment that continues to, it's one of those things with a stigma and a shame that is kind of layered into for the family, and it feels really bad. I want to talk about because this is something that families deal with, and it's stressful. Can you share with us, Joe, what it's like being a family visitor at a prison and the
Yeah.
randomness of the rules?
Yeah, it's really, and you were all, many of you were in prison and went through this on the other side. But visiting someone in prison is extraordinarily hard. The visiting hours are just a few hours a week, the social hours. Sometimes, since we're also attorneys, we get another visit, a legal visit. I'm going to focus on the average visit. A few hours a week, you can get there, and the prison is closed to you, and you can wait outside. Speaking of waiting outside, I have a dog that wants to get in, so I just
We
let him
want the
in. I
dog. Yes,
apologize
we
for
want the
that.
dog part of the interview, Joe.
Yes,
We want
right.
this. This is a family show.
It's a family. So you're waiting outside, and it might not open for an hour. It could be sleeting, it could be pouring. You're waiting with the other families. It might not open for the day. And if it opens, there may be a paperwork problem on your end or the Bureau of Prisons ends. That's just tough luck. And so you could go to visit your loved ones. We drive 400 miles each way to visit Sam, and it takes up 2 days. And you don't know if you'll get the full time, if you'll get part of the time. Sometimes you're turned away, and then you're begging for some kindness on behalf of a guard. Often it comes, and this isn't a knock on the BOP people. I do want to throw that in. I know our time is almost up. The BOP is full of human beings. I think human beings are good. They're often good, but the institution and the institutional considerations lead to this nightmare where you're just like your mind is on banking, which you don't want to think about. Now your mind is this visit going to be worth the 16 hours of driving?
Yeah, and I think what you just said there, my daughters and my wife today still remember Mr. Hudson that made them feel so comfortable, and they were so nervous about being there, and he became part of the family visit. And then there's this other person who turned him away, 3 different times, and how awful that was. There's such extremes,
Yeah.
and you never know what you're going to get. And that's the randomness and the unfortunate part of that part of family, because the if anything, the BOP should and the prison system should do anything and everything they can to make that connection continue to happen with families, because it's one of the most important things there is. I know we're getting close to the end of this, but what would be your advice, Joe, to people, families that struggle through these nightmarish tidal waves, because you've lived it and living it?
Uh, I think you have to focus, at least for me, on the good. And you've got to be glass half full to get through this. And being mindful of the present. And for me, it's maybe sunlight on the trees, a smile from someone who's a stranger. It sounds corny, but for me, and I think for other people, that can get you through it. And Brent, before we close,
Yeah.
I'd like to offer my email to people if that's okay. It's just my name, Joe Bankman at Gmail. I love to get feedback. I love to hear stories. So I see all these folks listening. I bet you have amazing things to tell me, and I'd love to hear them.
Well, the one thing I remember when we did our interview podcast, I asked you what your biggest takeaway was living through this experience. Do you remember what that was? Because you
I think
looked at the ceiling just like that.
yeah, I think it was people are good and
Yes,
maybe
people are
nice.
good at institutions. Can you share with us that feeling of yours?
Yeah, I came away more convinced than ever, actually, that people are basically good, but we've got institutional structures that kind of rob them of some of that basic goodness, and I think we've probably all encountered that.
And I think that's so true. I mean, I think that we find in this world that we live through these nightmares is that you find good from people that you weren't even expecting it from. And then the institution is this ugly monster that you're fighting that's, faceless, and it's all the time. And I think that's such a great takeaway is people are there. You can find people that will be supportive. And then you find in these situations, the family and the person who's being investigated, definitely find out who your friends are.
That's for sure.
Well, Joe, it's been a great interview, and I wish the best to you and your family. I've gotten to know you, and I just think the world of you, and the best of luck to everything.
Thank you so much.
Should I introduce video number 2? Video number 2 is Drew Chapin discussing reputation management, where so many people think about that they can't get themselves the way they want to look and show up online. Let the discoverability company help you with this problem.